Welcome to the Culture of You, meaningful dialogue with me and my favorite people. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Culture of You. I am your host, Karen Hewitt, and today I have somebody that we have been trying to get together pretty much the entirety of 2023. I'm so excited to be with Sangeeta Lakhani, Executive Director and founder of Service Relief Effort for his hospitality industry, which is a nonprofit organization that provides food and support to hospitality workers affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is going to be a beautiful conversation. Sangeeta has 20 years in the hospitality industry, so a whole lifetime and a career in the hospitality industry, but is also a community leader, a culinary artist. You know, everybody that's in the culinary world is not a culinary artist. I think there's a cookbook on the way, but we'll talk about that a little later. And we met at Leadership Columbus while I was the associate director, and Sangeeta was in our program, our flagship program. And I know we were supposed to meet. Like, there have been so many symbols around about, oh, like, you're gonna meet Sangeeta, right? Like, with my connections with Letha and all the people in the community in the service industry. And I just knew it was happen when it was supposed to. And I'm so glad we got to meet. And I can't wait to talk to you today. Sangeeta, what did I miss? Did I miss anything?
Oh my gosh, no, this is like the most amazing introduction. I'm gonna take you like in a boombox, like everywhere you
Yes.
go. You can
Let
just
me
like
be the
speak for me,
announcer.
right? Like, and here comes Sangeeta Lakhani.
It's
I
really
love
something I
it.
enjoy. Yes.
I
Yes. Well,
love it.
welcome. Thank you for being
Thank
here
you.
with me today.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
I guess I could say thank you for your service too, but we'll get there.
Yeah, thanks.
All
And
right.
you.
Indeed. So, what's your vibe? This is the first question that we ask everybody. So, tell us a little bit about your vibe personally, or like your culture, the culture you try to create or bring with you, when you personally and professionally. Break them down. If they're the same, then they're the same, but let us know how you are.
Wow, nobody's ever asked me that, so I appreciate that. I am a doer. I'm very focused on just getting things done. And I don't even, I think that since we're talking about culture, I think that's a cultural thing. I think
Mhm,
I measure success by how much I have achieved, how much I've
mm,
gotten done. And that goes like from a day to day basis, like how productive I was through the day, and
mhm.
just overall where it comes to achieving my goals. I I'm a list maker. I'm a taskmaster. I just feel like I have this one shot at life, right? Like this is my
Mm,
one brief period, and who knows how long it's going to last. And I just want to,
mm.
I want to get it done. I want to like live every moment as productively as I can.
Wow. So let's talk a little bit about production, because people probably have their different, thoughts around this word, but you're in the service industry and production operations is key, right? So
Right.
when you think about your legacy, of all the people that have come and worked with you and for you, like, what do you want your legacy to be when you're not there anymore?
So I think, and this is something I've thought about a lot because most people build empires and then that's their legacy, right? Like
Hmm.
people are going
Hmm.
to remember my conglomerate. Restaurants come and go, right? I mean, you might love a restaurant for years and that might be the spot you always go to. But then once it's gone, you kind of moved on, right? You might
Right.
think about it once in a while, like, oh, I really miss the shrimp and grits at Bodega. But, then you've moved on and you found your shrimp and grits somewhere else. Um, my legacy is it's the talent I grow, it's the
Mm,
people I grow, it's the people behind me that follow these lessons, that take the little that I had to give and make something bigger from it, you know?
mm.
And,
I just thought of
my
like Sangeeta's legacy, and then I just saw like all these people like as little flowers blooming and like being like, I did this because of my inspiration from Sangeeta.
but it is, right? Because we strive our whole lives to take in so much knowledge.
Hmm.
We learn so much, hopefully. I mean, I don't know if everybody learns so much, but, that is one of
That's
my
fair.
right? You study, you research things, you try to be the best at what you're doing. And for not, if you haven't passed it on,
Right.
right? I mean, you come in with nothing, you leave with nothing. And that goes with your knowledge too. So all
Mhm.
of this stuff that you've gathered, and for some people, maybe it's tchotchkes, right? I don't, for me, it's knowledge and experiences, and talent and art. And I want to put those out. I want to plant those seeds when I go,
Mhm.
right? I want to talk about the things that I learn about. I want to share that knowledge and I mean, it's the corny to throw in weird quotes, but good leaders create more leaders,
Mhm.
right? And I want that. I want the people that have worked with me and for me to learn those qualities and go from there, not just be content and I guess I'll always work for somebody else. Like I don't want people to be followers. I don't want to raise followers. I want
Mm.
to raise the next generations of leaders in this field.
Fantastic. So to that point, let's talk about what got you to this business at this time, right? So the pandemic. Let's talk about the pandemic and what you have seen as the impacts of that on the service industry. What has been the impacts that you have seen over the last 4 years? And what do you think are some of the impacts that we haven't seen yet?
So, whew, I could talk about this for years. And also,
Carry
it
on.
already feels like it's been 10 years since COVID hit, right?
Mhm.
So, I think a lot of the underlying issues that have been going on in the service industry for 20, 30 years
Mhm.
just came to surface during COVID because suddenly, without those jobs, people realized that they were living week to week. They
Mhm.
didn't have savings, they didn't have health benefits, they didn't have a lot of the things that we talk about as just stability for going out into successfully maneuvering a workforce, right?
Mhm.
Like to go to work, you need basics like a house, right? You need to be able to take care of your kids, make sure there's
Mhm.
childcare, make sure you have health care, some mode of transportation, whether it's a bus, a bike, a car, whatever it is. And I think when COVID hit, the service industry realized really fast that they didn't have most of those things,
Right.
right? Um, and very quickly after the restaurant shut down, restaurants were asked to reopen. We were considered first responders, right?
Yeah.
Because grocery stores couldn't keep up with the food demands.
Mm.
There were supply chain issues. There were so many variables there. So restaurants were asked to reopen. People's mental health was taking a toll. They needed that social interaction, even if it was that 30 seconds of walking into a restaurant and grabbing your meal.
Mhm.
Just that face to face interaction for a minute was huge for a lot of people. So we were asked to reopen in the midst of this pandemic that, we're constantly watching, like being televised, like, oh my God, so many deaths, so many people are getting sick, wear your mask, keep your
Mm.
distance, do all of these things. And here we are back at work with no health insurance,
Oh my god. Yes.
right? And that was a scary moment. And it- where do you stand? Like if you've been working, making money cash, and suddenly your unemployment kicks in, you've been making, say, $1,500, $2,000 a week, which is what a good server, bartender make a week.
Mhm.
Suddenly you're making $400 a month
Right.
because you couldn't show how much you made, right? Because it's
Right.
cash tips or
Mhm.
cash business predominantly. Um, so there was a huge toll there because now you're being asked to go back to work. You don't have health care. Maybe you have kids at home. Maybe you have partners at home. So you're taking this risk of bringing this disease back to your house, this
Right.
virus back to your house. But you can't not work because you're getting $400 a month,
Right.
right? So I think it put people like it. I think there was a lot of clarity for a lot of people then. Like, do I
Mhm.
continue down this path that for some reason in the last 50 years has become a profession to look down upon, right? We lost our legitimacy, we lost our professionality. It was suddenly oh, when are you going to get a real job,
Right.
right? So this, where does your ego fit into all of this?
Mm.
You go back to work and work for an industry where your needs aren't being met because you have to make money, or do you take the money the government's giving you and go pursue another career that maybe your family is going to be proud of, right?
Wow.
Or you can talk to your friends about. So I
Oof.
think
There's
there was,
so much stigma with the service industry, but it's honestly, I look for that as someone who's in organizational management and senior leadership. I look for that type of experience somewhere in your resume when I'm hiring because it lets me know that, or like athletics, because it lets me know that you have a team mentality. You
right,
know that if you're going to miss your scheduled shift, you're going to get it covered. Like
right,
there's a certain level of communication, even in the back of house, right? Like you have all this communication that's happening behind, or like little things like that, heard, like, you're hearing all of that in the
right.
back and you're communicating. And these are actually skills that I look for in my big corporate executive DEI job. Like that's what I look for on my team.
Yep. Customer service, the on your feet problem
Hmm.
solving, like
Yeah.
it's, and doing all of that while staying
Hmm.
invisible,
Yeah.
right? Because
Oh,
God forbid you get seen or heard about your table. You're ruining my experience. Um,
right.
so it is, it's such a fragile industry, but who doesn't use it, right?
We
I
all
mean,
use it. Right.
getting you're going to hotels. You said you've been traveling for work, right? You're
Hmm.
staying in hotels, picking up your coffee in the morning, your baby showers, your wedding cake, your, divorce drink, your I just got fired, I gotta do 5 shots, like
And
everything
those
requires,
bartenders are hearing everything. They are mini
right?
psych therapists.
Right.
Like for real.
Everything requires the service industry.
Mm.
And it has been so kicked in the stomach
Mhm,
for so long.
mhm.
There was a time where you were like, oh, my grandmother has worked in this diner for 75 years and everybody knows her in town. And it was a hallowed profession, right?
Mhm.
Like, oh my gosh, really, like we all know your grandma. And then it suddenly became this thing that was like for the untouchables.
Mm.
Like, ew. Oh, you're a dishwasher? Ew. Well,
It's a good
bitch, aren't you
living.
a dishwasher at home? What are you doing? Would you go home and wash the dishes? Would you throw them away after you eat? Like, what is wrong with being a dishwasher? You know,
Right. Mm.
it is just such a strange view. So all of that came to a head during COVID, right?
Mhm,
And there's Matt, Letha, and I just shut down our restaurants,
mhm,
and we're struggling with like, what is this? What is happening? My last restaurant, the table had been a teaching kitchen, so
mhm,
I'd raised my staff, and and to see them like walk away and struggle like that was
mhm.
not not part of my makeup. Like I couldn't just be like, ah, hope they figure it out. I'm just
Good
gonna
luck.
rest for a while,
Godspeed.
doing this right. So we had to do something,
Mhm,
and that's where service came from. And initially it was supposed to be a temporary fix, right? It was a band-aid. Let's just feed people because we know how to do that. And we,
mhm.
have the network in this community to be able to put together a commercial kitchen literally overnight,
Yeah.
and start putting out the meals. And it was just a temporary fix. Like, I don't think if you'd asked me in 2020 if I was still going to be doing this in 2024, I would have been like, no, no,
I don't think
eh,
so.
no, no. I'm just gonna, go back to making pancakes. Like it really wasn't
Mhm,
in my realm of thinking, like as in something that sudden, I'd
mhm,
always known that I'd end up in this arena somehow,
mhm,
but I didn't understand the nonprofit world or didn't understand what this part of it looked like. I just knew at
mhm.
some point I would be part of some philanthropic venture.
Right.
Um, and then, you know, the world has its way of laying your path in front of you, and you just have to sometimes follow it.
Well, what has your biggest or most meaningful learning as you've moved into executive director? Like you didn't just do a nonprofit thing, like you like, I'll run the whole thing. But like what is your biggest and most meaningful like takeaway from this work?
I think so. If you're an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter what playing
Hmm.
field you're in, you're going to figure it out, right? It's
Hmm.
just in our nature. Like I love a good problem because it gives me something to solve, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, but in Columbus, in this arena, this whole world of nonprofit, and I don't know, this might happen everywhere else. I have no idea. I can only speak to my experience. It is how fast the community comes together to do something good.
Mm.
And I really saw, because I had to create a whole new network, right?
Mm.
Network as a restaurateur over the last 30 years was suddenly just, kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, like it didn't serve this new thing that I was doing.
Hmm.
So to build this entire new network in a short amount of time, I just don't see it happening as fast as it did in Columbus anywhere else. I think we're still small enough that we care
Yeah.
about holding each other up, you
Hmm.
know. We don't have as many shiny distractions to be like, "Eh, I'm just gonna go help that nonprofit, or there's 30 services, and I'm gonna go spend my time somewhere else."
Hmm.
But it's been amazing how fast this came together for me and how much people have supported me. And more than anybody, how much women
Hmm.
have supported me, which has been a huge shift in my career because I came from such a male dominant field.
Hmm.
And, I was just always struggling to be seen as a chef. Like I didn't want to be a woman, I didn't want to be a man, I just wanted to be a chef, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was so difficult in this male dominated arena. And if it wasn't, I think my color really helped fit into that role for me
Hmm.
earlier. So to come into this new field and have so many women show up to support me and build me up and help me build service and,
Hmm.
everything that goes with it, to me was just mind blowing.
Yeah, I think there is something really special, and I've experienced it in, I'm on the board for Zora's House, but like I've experienced it with women, uh, women of color, and then also in the Black, queer, and trans community. Like the love and support is like real, and I think that's also a testament to you, right? And the relationships that you've built. You know how to build relationships. I can't imagine. I know what it's like to build a network from scratch in a new space. But like I think there's something to be said about how quickly people could take to you because of how authentic and genuine you can show up. And like if you're an entrepreneur and you're working with people, you know when somebody's authentic and you know when somebody's about what they say they're about, right? And so I think there's something that can be seen in you, like even just knowing that I was eventually going to meet you, like it was one of those things where I was like, okay, I know what this person's about, and you can like connect off of that really quick. And so shout out to Columbus and shout out to the people that have that discernment that can figure out who to work with quickly. Like you got to
Mhm.
make those decisions after your first meeting of like,
Right.
am I going to put all this money in here with you? Am I going to be a business partner with you? Am I going to go through the hard times with you, cuz there's no guarantee of anything at this point. So it's like,
Yeah.
am I going to take this risk? And it definitely is reciprocal, but I think that's a testament to who you are and how you show up too.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Hmm.
It is just so much easier to be who you are.
Hmm.
It's so difficult to add the layers. Like, it's just so
Mm.
much easier to just, I'm here. Like, I fought to be here,
Mm.
as an immigrant, like, it was not easy to leave home, to leave my family,
Hmm.
to come here. And, I feel like, and I don't know, this might be similar to the Black experience, I don't know, but to
Hmm.
show up and all you wanna do is blend in, right? You
Right.
don't wanna stand out.
You
You
want
don't
your
wanna be
invisibility
noticed,
cloak.
right?
Yes.
Like, and I came here and I had an accent and I'm from India and, like, there were so many, like, things that I was trying to, like, "Man, I'm just here to do a thing, like, can you just not, like, look at me?" And, uh, you
Yes.
know,
That's so real.
and then to, like, come to that realization, obviously, with age and wisdom, it's like, man, I made it this far because of who I am, because of
Yeah.
all of those challenges that I had, right?
Mhm.
So I have nothing to hide, right? Like, yeah, I
Mhm.
listen to Bollywood music, and yes, sometimes I'll say aluminum instead of aluminum, and yes, those things are going to happen, but I am this because of all of that, right? So it's just
Ah.
now easier to be like, here she
And I
is.
mean, I really do appreciate, there's all kinds of sides of coins around this, but I think there is so much, and that's why I can still work in DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. If anybody's listening to my podcast and doesn't know that, let's talk. But DEI, like the reason I can still do that is because like there will never be a time when I'm like saturated with stories. Like I'm never gonna be like, oh, I don't want to hear Sangeeta's story because I know enough stories of
Right.
resilience. Like, no, like I want to hear your story. And like that when I'm here hearing your story, like that's gonna be the most meaningful thing to me. And like resilience is so present and there's so many layers to so many lived experiences. And it's just such a teacher. And so like, I've watched you deal with that, but, like, how do you balance that, like, complexity of your lived experience with there's a lot happening globally right now. This may be a really big question, so take your time. But, like, how do you balance that knowing of yourself, that knowing of your culture and your tradition and your history and your ethnicity? Like, how do you take all of that into, like, "I'm gonna show up as myself?" Like, do you get time to yourself? Like, how do you navigate that?
I do take time to myself, and that is a recent discovery. I think, like, as a restaurant owner, I don't think time exists.
Mhm,
You're just like working, right? You're
mhm,
working at 80 hours a week, and hopefully you can stand over a trash can and shove some food in your mouth and
mm,
fall asleep for a moment and do it all over again. So I have really, since COVID, learned to take that time for myself. But I think COVID for me was my silver lining too, because I got
mm,
to sit back and look at myself as a whole because there was a little bit of time, right? Like, who
mhm,
am I now? Um, for so long, I've been carrying around this baggage of who I was, right?
mm,
Like, this is where I came from, and these are things I had to deal with, and this is, these were the mountains I had to climb, and I was just, and these are the traumas I had, and my mom was like this, my dad was like this, whatever examples, but and I was just like dragging these suitcases around with me everywhere,
ooh,
and they were just, and I didn't even notice they were just part of my makeup. I didn't realize how much weight I was lugging around, like,
wow. That's
and
such a powerful metaphor.
right, it
Like
was
cute Erica Badu bag lady, right?
right, so I didn't recognize it. I didn't have time for my sadness. I didn't have time to, think about who I was, and when I did, it was the biggest, brightest moment in my life to, be like, I don't need this. I don't need this stuff anymore.
Mhm,
I'm an amazing human. I've done
mhm.
awesome things. I've worked hard. I've, been the best mother that I could. Now, don't ask my kids that, but that was no, no, they
You did
love
your best. We know that. We gotta give our
no, they,
parents that
but
room.
no, I have done my best. I'm a kind person.
Mhm,
I'm a giver. I'm a lover. And I'm like, I don't need all this anymore. This this helped me get to where I am. Maybe I needed to carry that weight to become who I
Hmm.
am today, but now I'm
Hmm.
here. I've arrived, right? I don't need
Mm,
to carry all this with me anymore. But it also gave me that freedom to stop running from it
mm.
and
Like
own.
it's like well, this doesn't serve me anymore. I think sometimes we get stuck as humans with like, well, this doesn't serve me anymore, but I love it. Like it's been with me all along. It's my teddy bear, it's my baby,
Right,
it's my stone, it's my lucky coin or whatever. And
right,
then it becomes like a thing where it's like it actually doesn't serve me anymore and I can release it back to the universe for somebody else to get it or whatever you believe,
right.
but like I don't need to carry this anymore. That's
No,
like the most beautiful revelation.
and it's okay. It's okay that I had that. It's okay
Hmm.
that that happened, right?
Hmm.
It really has made me who I am. And I'm a fucking awesome human being, you
I'll
know?
vouch for that.
Thank you for all of that because I needed that to get here,
Hmm.
but it also like let me stand back long enough to make room to bring my culture along, like to recognize myself as an Indian
Hmm.
again. So it gave, for so many years, I had tried to blend into this culture
Hmm.
that I had kind of left my own culture to the side, right? I'd left it at the doorstep because I had to just not get noticed. So I had enough time to be the person I needed to be without being called out for being Indian or having an accent or, oh, do you guys eat curry or whatever, like the biases are, right?
Hmm.
And it gave me a moment to, like, I started cooking Indian food through COVID and I hadn't
Hmm.
touched Indian food and like, I mean, I cooked it, but not with the same passion as I do now.
Wow.
Mm. So it really brought me back to my roots again and to be able to bring those parts of my culture to me. I do regret the fact that I didn't come to it sooner and share it more with my kids,
Yeah.
but it's never too late, right? Here I am. And it's been it's been amazing to come back to myself.
Wow. So with that, I know you're an entrepreneur. I know you always got a next project on the way. So my question to you is, whatever you feel comfortable, what are your next like project aspirations or ideas that you're like excited to? I know that we talked about the cookbook, right? So like I don't know if
Mhm.
that's still
Mhm. Yep.
existing or in progress. But what else is in your mind that you want to
Yeah,
share now that you've
so
had this?
I am still working on the cookbook. I think it's
Hmm.
a long process for me. It is part of my going home to myself journey, right? Because I'm kind of using the cookbook as a vehicle to dredge up some of the things that I'd put away.
Oh, so this is therapy.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Um,
Love that.
I did have some trauma growing up in India, and I think I'd like just packed it all away in those suitcases that I was lugging around. And now it's time to like, some of those things shouldn't be forgotten. So this cookbook is my way of going back to those places and bringing
Mm,
back those memories and, sharing all of that with the world or whoever will buy the book. Beyond that, service is getting ready to open a restaurant. Um,
mm,
yeah, we're working through our lease right now at the new Gravity building right
hmm.
next to Ohio Health
Yep.
on Broad Street. One part of it will be a restaurant run by service. One part of it will be an incubator space available for anybody that wants to open a restaurant
Hmm.
and needs a few months of consulting and fine tune their menu, their labor costs, their food costs. They'll be able to work with the labor pool we have in the restaurant and
Okay.
they'll be open to the public. So when they're ready to launch, they'll have a little client base, some staff if they choose to take them. So the other side that's being run by service will be training grounds for existing service industry members. So
Oh, that's
you've been a
huge.
bartender for 5 years and you want to become a beverage manager, or you want to become a sommelier. Um, Say you've been a sous chef for 10 years and never been able to take the next step and become executive chef, or you want to become a food and beverage manager at a hotel, or whatever
Mhm.
your next steps are, we will train you and get you there.
This is a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't just like a little
No, this isn't
nugget.
just
This
a
is
little thing.
huge.
Yeah.
And I need to
Yeah.
talk to
So
you
we're
outside of this podcast too, because
we're
what?
really excited about it. There'll be master classes offered to the staff there. So it'll
Mhm.
be paid training, right? Instead of going to culinary school, which not everybody can afford to take the time out and go to school while holding down a job.
Yeah.
So this will be in lieu of that.
Wow.
We'll have master classes, a lot of people around town, a lot of sommeliers, butchers, charcuteriers. We've spoken to a lot of people that will come in there and teach.
Yeah.
Um, there will be a library there for the staff. So if there's any research they want to do, books they
Wow.
want to read, recipes they want to work on, all of that, all of those resources will be available to them. We will also have a case manager there
Mhm.
so that we can deal with things like housing,
Mm.
childcare, transportation, all of the things that are barriers to people successfully going back to work.
It's so
Right.
beautiful. I'm
Yeah.
like I'm like, "Oh, there are so many nonprofits, that I had my stint in nonprofit, work, and there's so many young people and young adults that are gonna benefit from this. Also, people that are, in quarter 3 and quarter 4 of their lives that wanna
Right.
do something new, and, like,
Right.
I have this dream of going back to a grocery store and being a bagger in my retirement. I don't know if that's gonna happen, but it might. And I just think there's so many opportunities there, and, like, how loving to create a space where there's a soft landing too. It's not just operations and promotions and productivity. It's like, we care about you too,
Yeah.
here is a human. That's so beautiful.
And I think
Mm,
that is also something that came out of COVID, right? Just realized that I didn't finish answering your question
mm,
earlier, about what the repercussions are for the restaurant industry after COVID, right?
mhm,
And I think, beyond the financial hit that people took, there's so much more, right? How do we professionalize this industry again?
mhm.
How do we get rid of this antiquated, toxic culture that exists in restaurants, right? Like nobody anymore is standing there dealing with a chef yelling at them and demeaning them and, like crushing their spirit. You're never going to make it. You're never going to be a chef.
It doesn't work.
It
We're
doesn't
not
work.
tearing
And,
people down to build people up. That's not it.
I mean, and
Yeah.
then there are chefs that the world looks up to, like chefs like Thomas Keller, from the French Laundry,
Mhm,
who has he's built up his station in life where he could talk down to somebody, right? Like, oh, you don't know as much as me. But he is a man who will like put his arms around you and show you very delicately how to do something.
mm,
Once again, it's a leader training leaders,
mhm.
not just somebody who's going to follow everything you did blindly because you're yelling so much, right?
It's
And
like that people first mentality that you can kinda get that from the nonprofit sector, but it's like a way of life really that we should be
inspire,
adopting.
right? Inspire people to do better. Inspire
Mm.
people to work harder for you, not just because you screamed at them long enough,
Yeah,
right?
that's really a lesson for all of us.
Yeah. So
It's a
it's
big
just,
lesson.
so I want to make sure that we build that culture and we let people know that this is what they should expect when they go into the workforce. You
Mhm,
know, I might not be able to hold every restaurant owner or every chef accountable, but if I can empower the ground warriors that go into these restaurants to work,
mhm.
then they're not going to put up with that, right?
Mm.
So you can't always make the change from top down. Sometimes you have to make the change from bottom up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's really where the change comes in. And we're only as successful as our leaders, right? So
Right.
you're leading this and you're creating a space where people can come to you with questions, suggestions. Hopefully
Mhm.
they're siphoning all of that wisdom from you, right, in those experiences. But I feel like the underlying, part of this conversation is like the journey of you coming home to yourself and having these realizations and then showing up with this desire to inspire future leaders. And like, has that given you a different, has it made more meaning or a different meaning after you're like, you had a couple weeks, I don't know how long you spent off the lines, right? But like after you had a month or two or whatever, to really be like, where am I in this? What version of myself am I in now? Who am I now, right? And how do I want to incorporate that into my work? Has it been like meaningful in a different way? Or what has what have you noticed about these last 4 years?
It has been very meaningful. I mean, and it's not just, me thinking that. Like, I've had my kids come up to me and go,
Mm.
"You really changed." Like,
Mm.
don't know what happened, but there's like a serenity about you now. I am so much calmer than I was. And I think it's because I worked in this industry that was like just tense and it was about the hustle all the time. And you're just racking your brain trying to figure out how to like solve the next money problem or the next labor problem or whatever it was. And
Mhm,
it has been like I see it and I feel it in myself. I
mhm,
feel this just everything's okay.
mhm.
I can do it from this place too. I don't need to be
Mm. That pause, once I realized I could do it and actually be slower and actually take more time and intention, it was like, "Oh, this is actually better quality of work.
right.
Like, this is better connection," right? Like, I'm able to connect with people more. I'm able to really get underneath, like, they didn't miss this deadline because they don't know how to do it, right? Like, they missed this deadline because life is happening, and I need to check in about that. And so, like, it
And
just gives you different eyes.
that's a huge thing, right? I mean, because and as far as regrets go, it was I do regret not taking the time in my career earlier to ask people why are you consistently late? Like,
Mm,
what is the issue? Like, maybe we talk about that and figure out like if we need to change your schedule or
mhm,
why do you keep messing up this recipe? Instead of just going like, fucking somebody else make this. Like, he just can't figure it out. Just stopping and going, oh wow, I didn't realize he had a problem with reading.
mm,
Or, I didn't realize that he was taking 4 buses to get to work, and maybe that's why he was late. I
right.
just had expectations,
Mhm,
and you better meet me right here,
mm,
you
yep,
know?
mhm,
And I wish I'd taken that time earlier and to think about how many people that slipped through the fingers because I didn't take the time to ask them what
yeah.
was wrong, right?
Yeah,
And
that hurts. As a leader looking back, that hurts.
right? But
Mhm,
but you have to be honest about that too, because otherwise how do you change?
right.
Right? If I don't recognize that I made those mistakes, I can't do better today.
Yeah, I think as a whole, as a collective, we don't always make time to hear like more than one or two sentences about something. Right? Or it's like no excuses, and then the person can never tell you what happened. Like, I'm
Right.
like, "I'm nosy, I wanna know what happened." Let me use these math skills for good, like, let me ask some questions and get
Right.
in here, but I do think that that's a product of, like you said, that culture, and previously what we do know. I mean, my sister is a chef, I've dated a couple chefs, and, like, that culture is one of those where it's like I don't actually care what's going on with you. I need this out and I need it in this time. Right.
Right.
And if you can't do that, then carry on, do
Move,
whatever you got
yeah,
to do, but like
yeah.
not here.
Yep.
So, yeah. Have you seen, over the last, I want to say, couple months to 3 months, we've had some global conflicts. Currently, now there are 13 global conflicts going on right now. So I will say that I just really think we have a really hard time uh, around remembering that we're all human. That's a whole thing. But have you seen its impacts on, like, we had, in the same year that we had COVID, we had the protests of George Floyd. And so how does that impact the service industry and your team members?
So the demographic I work with right now
Hmm.
is so traumatized by their own
Mm.
lives that anything beyond them is just a distraction.
Wow.
They come from, they've had such hard lives and they're coming from so much just trauma and darkness,
Hmm.
that,
So they're trying to survive too.
right, anything
Hmm.
on a global level, is just beyond.
Mm.
Like, they're like, "I don't even know how to fix this." Like, I just got out of jail 2 days ago. I'm trying to get a job, I'm trying to feed my kids, and I work in a restaurant, and I have food insecurity, right? Like, I'm I'm just trying to get through the day. Um,
Mm. That's
for me,
such an interesting
it's
perspective
right,
too. Like,
it's
it's a luxury.
right, and, so when those conversations have come up, like, obviously, the most recent with Palestine, Israel, when those conversations have come up,
Hmm.
I think it is just like, "Oh my god, it happens in other places too,"
Hmm.
because to them, that and as horrific as this conflict is right now, that's how they see their lives.
Mm.
Like, they're going through
Wow.
their own Israel and Gaza, like, and they're just like, "Oh, wow, that happens in other places too."
Like, I can empathize with that.
Yeah, they're like, "Yeah, there's shootings on my street every night too. I don't
Mm.
know when I'm taking a bullet, so I don't really care about that person in Gaza taking one." Right? So it
That's
is.
such an interesting perspective. And I don't know. We don't already have the framework to talk about hard things anyway.
Right.
I mean, we do, but like, as a collective,
Yeah.
we don't. And so I'm so interested in, of course I have my things that I do, and whenever it's about values, beliefs, all that kind of stuff. But it is a luxury to be able to sit and look at the world globally and have an opinion and state it and whatever, without fear of
Absolutely.
retaliation, but it's definitely something interesting to think about, people that are in the throes of their own survival, and how much they're not even like aware of it, because it's just every day is a fight for
Right.
them.
Right.
Wow. I think I needed that perspective today. I think I did. So thank you for that. And so, as you move into some really wonderful things, like, this is amazing. I'm so excited to see, and I hope to be of support, even if it's just sending people work opportunities
Oh,
here,
yeah.
you know. But like, what is your vision for yourself? Um, I don't have to put years on it, but like, as you're living creating your legacy and continuing to build a really phenomenal legacy, what's your vision for Columbus and community?
I think Columbus is on this tremendous trajectory right now, right? We have been for a while, and growth is inevitable, and evolution is inevitable. I just hope the leaders of this community can not, like, can take a moment, can take their own pause to make sure the independent businesses have the support they need. I hope we
Hmm.
don't just get lost in our dreams of Intels and Googles and Amazons and
Hmm.
forget that all of that stuff bleeds our economy out, and we need to support independence in a
Hmm.
different way now because now they're going up against these behemoths, right? And I
Hmm.
feel like we need to, and I hope, our community can come together and support or find a way to subsidize or help independent, especially more diverse businesses,
Hmm.
get reflected and supported in this community. I mean, downtown is still lacking diversity, right? I
Hmm.
mean, I know it's being worked on and I hear the stories,
Yeah, and
but
some people are like, I also like I wouldn't buy a business in the short north, me, because I'm not in the food industry, right? Um, and even in the gaming industry, which I'm in, it's like, would you ever have a, and I'm like Columbus is pretty saturated, right? So you're like, oh, okay. So the buyers are also like, I don't want to buy that too. Some like
right,
there's some of that going
right.
on back and forth. So yeah, there's a lot of trust to be garnered. I think trust and communication and collaboration that would need to be garnered for Short North to look as diverse as Columbus is.
Yeah. I mean, downtown with all of the stuff being built downtown,
Hmm. Hmm.
we're bringing all these like massive companies in. Well, with places like Intel comes a very diverse workforce.
Hmm.
I mean, these are guys working on microchips. Good
Right.
percentage of them are probably Indian, you know.
Right.
So let's have some of these business mirror the community that's about to
Hmm.
join us, right? Like
Yeah.
where's the support for these businesses? Because those Indians or, the Chinese, Japanese, whoever's coming to Intel to work is going to want businesses they recognize,
Hmm.
and we're just not mirroring that anywhere,
No.
you
And I
know.
think it'll be interesting because like New Albany is on the bus line as well. And so I don't know what staffing agencies they'll work with. I had my stint as an account manager at Staffmark. And for certain projects, you only pull your special people, right? Like you're
Right.
like, all right, I need you to go, but then I also need you to come back and tell me how the experience was.
Right.
Was it worth it? Like, how did it go? And I'm curious to see because I do know from in the industry that I'm in, we have like commissions, like gaming commissions, state commissions around requirements, and we have to pass those before we get approved to open up some kind of big business there. And
Mhm.
so I'm curious what was promised around, some of those larger entities in terms of their booming of our economy, right? Like they have to have all these metrics around the diversity in those hiring, like what is the demographic, like they're doing all of that type of stuff.
How are they
uh,
getting to work?
exactly, and so
Right.
I'm really curious how that is, but I think like from a community perspective it's really important to keep leaning into community, right, when we
Yeah.
can, like, yes, take opportunities there, but I mean a lot of those places, even if they use staffing agencies, once you leave you can't get rehired, right? Like you may be able to
Right.
get rehired through another service industry, but that's all about production. That's going to be all about production of whatever it is. If it's a chip, it's a chip, like whatever that is, it's going to be all about production. And we hope that there's still a connection for people that had been here to like the community and like the people here. And so that's what I see you doing with this next step for you all at service.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about it.
Me too. All right. I didn't know that. So I got new information today. I hope everybody got new information today. And the last part, we like to put me in the hot seat. So I would love to hear as wild as you want to get, as true as you want to get. You can also be like, what would you do in this case? And it could be a totally made up scenario. It could just be a question. But I'm gonna give you the mic for a second and you get to ask me a question. Give me a scenario. We'll talk about what you would have done, but I'm gonna also tell you what I would think about, and we'll just combine all our perspectives for really one big wise perspective. And then and then we'll be done. But like, do you have a scenario that you're thinking about?
I know the one thing that came up during Leadership Columbus, and it was one of
Mm.
the things that I wanted to sit with you outside and talk. And I don't
Hmm.
think it's a scenario in particular,
Okay.
it's an at-large question. Is so being Indian and
Hmm.
being in the United States of America, I
Hmm.
struggle with where I fit in between the white community and the Black community.
Hmm.
Right. And sometimes, like when it's obviously something specific, like the George Floyd thing, like it was right is right and wrong is wrong, right? It was
Hmm.
a very black and white situation, sorry
Fair.
to say. Um, but I struggle with conversations sometimes, and
Hmm.
especially with my Black peers. I think white people are just too scared to like rattle or shake any feathers. So
Hmm.
I bring up something, everybody's just like, okay, yeah, yeah, you're right, because nobody wants to like shake anything up. But I am a little more hesitant when it comes to correcting or stating my opinion to my Black peers when it comes from the opposite side,
Hmm.
because it isn't received as well.
Hmm.
Um, And I understand, a defense mechanism being at play
Hmm.
with a lot of Black people, but I just don't know like how to maneuver those conversations. I don't know if I just shut up, but I'm not the shut up person, right? Like I want to have that healthy debate. I want to have that conversation. I also have a lot to understand. I don't
Hmm.
originate from this country, so I haven't shared the history or those conversations from childhood.
Sure.
Um, and I really struggle when it comes to having, like, there are times that I've heard some of my Black friends make incredibly, I thought, were inappropriate or racist comments towards my white friends.
Hmm.
But it's somehow a joke in that sense, and you can't call them out for it.
Mm.
And
This, yeah, we talked about
it's
like,
like that a larger conversation, but here it is.
mhm.
I'm bringing it up.
I love it. Let's get sticky. Let's get gray. So I think this has to go back at the root of it is around right relationship, right? I've had a situation and a scenario with a friend that was a white friend. And I would always joke around about them being the only white person in the room or that kind of thing. And one day they looked at me and they were like, like that's enough. Like that's, and I was just like, I didn't realize it impacted you in that way. And I think the thing we can't have a conversation about race without having a conversation about power,
Mm,
right? And historically, power has been, we know who's been in power. We all know around the
yes,
world how that has
around the
looked.
world. Yep.
How that has looked in terms of colonization. Some people will call it settler colonization, but around white supremacy and how that shows up in leadership and tyranny and whatever form of government you have. But I think the notion for a lot of people that with the different layers of social stratification, it gets tricky because there are people like we don't agree. We all don't agree as
Mhm.
Black people about things. I just did with my team, we did the 1619 project, right? We listened to it and we had reflections. And as someone who is Black and is very attached and connected with my parents and their history, like we're about 4 generations in now of being in America, right? Having got here, I've learned some history and done all that kind of stuff. And I'm a history buff. Like I'm into it. I'm into the storytelling. I'm kind of a griot in my own way. So there's like all of this stuff there that I have understanding of. If I don't have the same baseline of conversation with the same person, with the other person that I'm talking to, it's really hard to determine what is acceptable. And like there's this reading the room superpower that I have because I am Black and I'm in a lot of rooms. And historically, I've been in a lot of rooms that there weren't a lot of Black people in, right?
Mhm.
And so you can learn how to assimilate and things like that. But around uh, a Black person making a comment about a white person and it being racist, I would say it is prejudiced just from a language and culture definition type standpoint. It is prejudiced because typically, now this may not be true in this case, but typically the white person has more influence and power.
Sure.
Now, if you're a peer group, it gets tricky, right? Like, because who has power? Now, as someone who is Black, I can experience racism. As someone who is Indian, you can experience racism because the de facto dominant is white
Yep.
and typically male, cis, hetero, right?
Right.
And so when you have that standard, you don't know where people sit socially. And that has changed because there's so much diversity in the classes now. Not enough, I would say, but there is a lot more diversity in leadership and influence and power. So I think around that conversation, it's like if you're with your friends and somebody says something inappropriate, I'd be like, that's harsh. Or like, tell me more about that comment, you know? And like if the both parties are like, it's okay, there's so much to worry about in the world at this point that I'm like, I'm not gonna worry about that. If you're not worried about it,
Right.
and I try not to speak up for people on their own behalf unless we have that understanding and that relationship. So like when I think about right relationship, it's like I want to be in right relationship with my friends of all genders, ethnicities, religions, race, like all of that. If I want to be in community and connection with them, then I need to understand what matters to them. I need to understand their story, right? And then I'm not going to make jokes about whatever is sensitive. That's how I think about it. But around like something being inappropriate, like there is a level in the Black culture where we joke a lot. Like my family, we roast each other, like for love, And if I'm not
Right.
roasting you, like what's wrong, you know?
Right.
And so sometimes that those jokes can go to what may feel like inappropriate levels, but if they have an understanding and if they're okay, then I'm like, everybody good? Okay, cool. I'm gonna move on. Like that made me uncomfortable. I might, not spend as much time with that group or whatever, or I may have a private conversation with that person like help me understand like this relationship because I think if somebody said something like that to me, that I would that would hurt my feelings or that would make me upset, right? And so it's one of those things of right relationship and what's the conversation, but from a historical vantage point, to be DEI accurate, Black people, because power and dominance and influence still mostly lies and resources mostly lies with white male cis men, then it's like the conversation has to shift some generations later, I think. And I don't think we've caught up to it. Like, I don't think
And
we've caught up to it because it's like, I
yeah.
can't be racist to someone who has never had to experience like losing a job or not having opportunities because of their race. Like, I may be prejudiced and I may be inappropriate and I may be out of line, but I can't be racist.
And I get that. I mean, and I do see that a lot, which always puts me in a weird position because both sides don't see me as, I don't know, somehow as an Indian.
Mm.
People just don't
I don't know
like,
if that's
you know,
if I should tell you you've made it or
I
not.
don't,
Like
I don't know, right? Because, I think people are just like, well, my doctor's Indian, so, everything's fine, right? But like I really struggle with the place that I'm in because,
Mhm.
have I personally faced racism in India? No. Have I seen it here? Yes. Right. But India was colonized.
Right.
So we also have this like struggle and we were enslaved in our own country. We weren't
Mhm.
shipped anywhere else. We just lost our own
Mhm.
lands and our own wealth and,
Mhm.
our titles and we're enslaved in our own country for 400 years. Right.
And you mentioned untouchables,
Right.
and when you were talking about frontline workers and ground warriors, I love that shift in language. But that is talked about a lot in the book Caste, right? Like that
Yeah.
takes off of the caste system of India. And I think it's one of those things where it's like people will look for you as a first generation um immigrant or migrant, right? People will look at you and say, okay, well, how white can you get? Right. And so there's some people that are going to be, there's lots of folks in this world, and some people are going to be like, oh, like, I don't see color and do all of that kind of stuff and be like, Sangeet is really nice. And then some people will just be like, um, Sangeeta's like, there's some, where are you from? Right.
Right.
So there'll be those type of people. There will be people that are like, oh, this is like Soul Tribe. Right. And then there will be people that probably have some biases and stereotypes and may just ask you a bunch of really laborious crust was it laborious questions
Laborious, yeah.
about your culture and ethnicity, right? And so I think there's multiple people, and as I do this work, what I keep coming back to is like, how can I change the microcosms that I'm in? How can I hang around more people that are value aligned with me and belief aligned with me and understand it, right? Like, so you do have an experience that is actually um from whatever vantage point on that caste system you were in, you do have an understanding of what oppression looks like. You know what it's like to
Mhm,
be in an occupation type of setting,
mhm.
right? And so to me, that would make me, as someone who is curious and likes to connect, want to know more. um Find those people, right? Find the people who are curious, find the people who want to connect, find the people you can go with, because there's so much nuance, because we are about 4 to 5 generations in of people that came over and were a part of enslavement, right?
Right.
And so there's like, and I'm not saying that it's that many generations removed from the impact, because my grandparents were sharecroppers, you know what I'm saying? So it's not
Yeah.
like it's that far removed, but what I'm saying is there is nuance there. And I think, like, are we looking for someone to blame, or are we looking for connection? Right? Like,
Right.
how do we manage that and navigate that? And like, everybody's going to be on their different spots in the journey. At this point, at this age for both of us, like, you literally get to decide how you want to spend your time and your energy. And if someone is like, if it's a lot of emotional labor, um or if you find yourself being like, wait a minute, I want to tell my story here, or I'm not witnessed, or I'm not heard or seen. Like, those are the places that I probably won't spend that much time in. If it's not generative for me, if the conversation is not like loving and curious and like kind and open, I don't really want it. Like, I mean, challenge me, like, at the end of the day, and be
Yeah.
prepared for me to have information on the other end. But like, I'm up for a challenge. I love it when somebody
I
can
think
push
that
back.
is, yeah, I think the biggest struggle lies in the fact that most of the time, just being the outsider, I can see
Mhm.
X person's perspective and
Mhm.
X person's Y person's perspective because I
Mhm.
don't have any history with
And
either,
you're a leader too, like, I
right?
mean, you're used to, like, hearing all the
Yeah, all the
sides
sides
and
and,
then being like, "Oh, okay, I can see your vantage point,
and
I can see your vantage
those
point."
are the moments because where I'm like, well, this was wrong, and it's usually, the one side that always comes back and challenges me because, well, you don't understand. You don't understand. It's like, yeah, but I don't have to. It has nothing to do with your history right now. This is
Mm,
just the situation that's wrong. How you worded that was wrong. It has nothing to
mm,
do with the fact. So it
mm,
is a leader
mhm,
and it is an employee. And I hear it a lot.
mhm.
And it's something that's like been bothering me for a while.
Mm.
And I've
I
brought
think
it up a couple of times. I'm like,
mhm,
that's not really, it's
mm,
not cool. Like this person is obviously affected by it. And it's like, well, and for me, I'm like, you can't hold him responsible for the fact that his grandfather might have
mm,
been whatever. Like, this is obviously not that person. Like, can we look
mhm.
at the person for who he is and not for what his grandparents did?
This is so interesting, because I think, like, around that, what I do know to be true is that even though in this moment I may be responding, right, to a image or a perspective of a person based on all my experiences or previous experiences with this race. or this gender or this whatever,
Mhm.
right? And I think it's interesting to because there's a willingness, and I mean that's kind of emotional maturity there too. Like, can I still show up and have an individual connection and relationship with this person without just continuing to make these inappropriate jokes or inappropriate comments about their, like, can we not make those comments? Now, there may be something underneath it where it's like this person has done this and this and this every single time, and we're not talking about that. But if it's one of those things where it's like a one-off or like something that's like I'm warranted in feeling this rage, there's also like racial impact studies that are coming out now from the last 5 years. We also had racism declared as a public health crisis. There is racial trauma and CPTSD, which is complex PTSD because it's endurance over time.
Mhm.
Um, that some people, I think maybe if you can't look at somebody and not see them for the hundreds of years of cultural issues that they have, like I can't do that with every one of my white friends. Like that's exhausting, you know?
Right.
And so I think at some point this person probably is in their own way asking for relief, or asking for some sort of maybe, I don't know, AEP or some sort of services, because what I will say is that it's probably just not feeling witnessed or not feeling heard or valued or seen, which people will take a couple different ways. Sometimes, if I've been oppressed or experienced oppression, I may turn into the oppressor. Or, I mean, and typically with males, right? 78% of males that have been or experienced human
Abuse or
trafficking or
trauma.
abuse,
Right.
right,
Yeah. Yeah.
will then turn into the abuser, right? So there's a couple ways that can go with like how I'm going to respond if I'm ever harmed or abused or treated in a certain way. And I think that willingness to be like, yeah, like self-reflection, right, is a skill. And like if that person can't ever step back and say, you know what, like you don't like this, I'm going to stop saying it. It could be that simple, right?
Right.
um if that person is not willing to do it, it's like, what are you holding on to? Like, is this your version of reparations? Like, what is this? Because it's really hard to know that come from.
Mhm.
It's really hard to know that come from. And I think with willingness, I as a community, like I'm like, oh, I don't know. As a community, like diverse community, this is across all races. I don't find people to be very good with accountability. You have been. I've talked to you and you're like, yeah, I got to, this was a part of my career that I'm like, oh man, I wish I would have been a little bit more curious, right? But there's a lot of people that are not able to take accountability. We could see that based off, you could look in social media chats
True.
of
Yeah.
viral videos,
Yeah.
and there's no accountability there. And I think accountability asks for connection and repair. Um, and I think Tori said this, I think, on an episode, and like, you know, uh, blame looks for an enemy, right? Whereas accountability looks for repair. And I think as we start to have a lot of mixed race folks, um, as the generations start to happen and people start to integrate and do all of these things, I think it's still important to be like, all right, in this individual situation, what happened? Because there's so much clutter and distraction and nuance in everybody's story that it's like everybody's like, well, I've been oppressed too. And it's like oppression Olympics. I'm not interested in that personally, but I can't understand from a perspective if you've never in your life felt witnessed, heard, valued, as Black folks, we don't get a lot of worth and value poured back into us unless we're around certain people. And so to me, that's where I would explore first. Like, where is the witnessing, and how many times a day does this person feel not like witnessed and
Mhm.
affirmed,
Mhm.
and if and if you're a lot of people have been in their own neighborhoods for their entire lives. Like there are Black people that are like, I haven't seen a white person, right? So the
Yeah.
segregation is really real, and it's definitely real in Columbus too, if you look at the neighborhoods. So there's a lot of factors to consider. But I think one of those things is like, all right, well, this person has told you they don't like this. Like this one's cut and dry. The person has told you they don't like this. Stop doing it. Stop saying it. Like leave them alone.
Right.
So, and um I think people can pull the card that they need in that moment to acknowledge like I've been hurt too. Like, are you saying that because you've been hurt too that you deserve someone else deserves your fury, your wrath?
Right. Right.
You know, like those are
Yeah.
the kind of questions I will ask in a meeting. Like, do they deserve your wrath though? Like, can we work this out a different way?
Yeah.
You know, because
Yeah.
I'm not
I think it
into.
just, yeah, I think it always just gets tricky with me because I never know like how far I can go, like I said,
Mhm.
people just don't, like white people think like I'm with them, and then black people are like, well, she's almost one of us. Like, and I'm just like, yeah, but you're a dick and you're a dick. Like, I don't
How
wanna
about
like
I walk off into
goodbye.
the sunset by
I was
myself?
like, I'm gonna be there, like I'm gonna go find another race to hang out with. My people don't want me either. So
Oh man, I think belonging is so. I look a lot on there's an institute for belonging and othering. And so I get their emails and I'm on their email listserv and I just am so fascinated by it. But I also know that as someone that has, even growing up in the Black community, like I went to a Montessori school,
Mhm,
which had, like, I was in a class with first, second, and third graders and fourth, fifth, and sixth graders. And middle class, my parents had good city or teaching and government jobs. Um, and it was one of those things where like the church was the Black church, but my school was very integrated. And so, and then I went to private school, right? And so we all know what that looked like. So it was a Christian private school. So that, I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I always felt a little different because I think my knowing knew I was non-binary and non-gender conforming, right? And I was really fluid. And I also knew I was queer to some extent.
mhm.
And I also knew I was like a nerd. I know I'm neurodivergent now, but like I was like, I'm a nerd too. So I didn't always feel belonging where you would typically think I would get belonging. And so it's hard. I'm not going to lie about it. It's hard to find those pockets of belonging.
Yeah,
And I
it
hope
really
that
is.
in the last 4 years you've done that, but it's especially when there's a percentage of, less than 5% of our community in Columbus is Indian, or 4.5% is, queer and trans, right?
Yeah.
Like so like those pockets are hard to find. And once you find them, like hold on to them. But it's
Well,
belonging is
it's
tricky.
also funny because like, with racism, the weight of it in this country is Black people, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you don't think about like how you're being racist towards other cultures, and I mean, I see that a lot because people say things like namaste very nonchalantly to me.
Like what?
And I'm just like, what? And they're like, no, 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 we're not,
Where'd you learn that?
but I go to yoga, so namaste,
Mm.
and I'm like, oh, wow, man. Like, we're not going to get into this, but what did you just say? And I've had to go to yoga studios and have like, I end a class and the teacher's like, namaste. And I have to like have a conversation or send an email afterwards. I'm like,
Appropriated.
inappropriate. Like, this is not, it's not okay. Like, don't, this is racist. This is not even culturally appropriating. And use my culture. At least Indians are making money off it. But don't, like the t-shirts with the namaste in bed or the coffee mugs. I'm just like, that's racist, but people don't,
Mm. And I
that
think
doesn't exist,
and I think it's up to that race
you
to
know.
determine that, and I don't think we
Right. And
always
I
give
no, and
that.
I think we're too new here still, and we're, a
Mm.
small population, and we come from, the generations of Gandhi followers where it's,
Mhm.
you just sit and fast or you go on a salt march to get the British out, right? You don't scream about it, you don't get vocal about it,
Mhm.
you just like Do it
Mm,
quietly. It's the quiet quitting of our culture, right? Like,
mhm, mhm,
and it doesn't like to be in a country that's so loud.
mm.
I don't think we know how to find our voice, or we don't even
Yeah.
know how to use our voice.
Yeah,
So
and you don't know, like, where it's
come from
appropriate, and you're trying to
we
figure
come
out.
from the namaste culture. So obviously nobody's like yelling and screaming about like, can you not say that, please? Can you not say that to me? Can you take that off the
Ooh.
t-shirt? Can you take that off a beer can? Like it's, you
Mhm.
know, um,
And what's
but
been living inside me recently has been, as a recovering people pleaser, um, what does it mean to articulate my voice without yelling? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, how to figure out, not yelling literally, I mean, kind of, but, like, the
Yeah,
proverbial
yeah,
shouting into the ether. What does it mean to articulate it in a way that actually expresses my need or my want, or expresses what I'm feeling, so that people can actually connect with it, as opposed to be like, I don't know what to do with that, because people don't know typically what to do with Black
right.
woman, queer rage, any of that. So, like, what does it look like to ground and then figure that out? But I think you are bringing up a very timely conversation, because the world's not going to get any less integrated. Um, Obviously, with all the conflicts, we're going to have more people here too, and we can't even interact black and white, more or less. Um,
Bringing
Cultures
in
that we're not used to see. Yeah,
bringing in
like, I mean,
refugees, like how do
yeah.
you, make space for them in your conversation?
Oh my gosh.
Just
And
bringing them in isn't enough, right? Then we
mm,
also need to interact with them. You can't just be like,
yeah,
"Oh, I gave them land.
right. Like,
What
what's
more
the
do they
issue?
want?" Well, they're going to need jobs. They're going to
Hmm.
have to maneuver getting licenses if they want
Hmm.
to open a business. And,
Hmm.
I know how it was walking into a place to get a license to open my first restaurant. And,
Hmm.
they before I could even open my mouth, that dude had already made his decision, right? The judgment was made.
Hmm.
And then I started speaking and he was like, "Oh, you speak English real good." And I was like, "Oh, do I? Is it real good?" You
Thanks.
like, "Where did
Good.
you learn
Real good.
English?" And that then it changed and I got what I needed out of that, interaction.
Hmm.
But a lot of people coming over, are Somali brothers and sisters, or, whoever comes from Palestine or Israel, like whatever is going to happen soon. Or forget all of those people, the people that Intel's bringing in,
Hmm.
right? Um,
Hmm.
we're going to have to make space for them. And I think it's
Hmm.
important to remember that there is more than just black and white. And I know it's not easy to say that in this country, but it is.
It's not, and
We
I
have to
think,
make space for.
I hope black and white people are sick of this too. Like, I really do hope that, but I think, unfortunately, until conditions change, or until culture changes, it's hard to let go of that history, right? It's hard to let go of that truth, because it's still, like, we see in corporate infrastructure. um we're in the nonprofit sector now, so we're happy for you about that. But in the corporate structure, we see tactics used in chattel slavery still applied around productivity, numbers, firing, livelihood. Like, we still see those things applied. Performance pips, or what is it, improvement plans, right? And who gets improvement plans? Like, who is able to ask questions and talk back and challenge power? Like, we still see those things, and it's almost maddening, actually, to be honest, as someone who, you know is considered an expert in that field, like a subject matter expert. It's maddening to know the history and to have people talk about it like, what's the big deal? Like, get over it, right? So there's, like, that on one hand, and then there's also, like, yeah, but I wanna live and I wanna have a really good and enriched and connected life. So I'm gonna do what I have to do to have these conversations with people that I enjoy their energy and I wanna connect with. and let the stories come what may, right? Like let the race, ethnicity, all of that. So there's like these two ends of the spectrum where it's like, I want to connect with as many people as I can. And like, this is maddening to be in conversations and get all those microaggressions like that you just mentioned on some level from being a Black person. Like, right.
Right.
Like I get all of those too. And so it's like, it's hard. It's hard because there's this grappling and like this planning for your own peace that you have to do. Like you have to find your people, you have to plan for peace. And like I joke around with my wife, but the joke is that the book is called Nobody Feels Sorry for You. Right. For me, like that's the joke. We'll be like, oh, that's in another chapter of the book. Nobody feels sorry for me because I have the privilege of wrestling with some of these things, but my lights are on. I'm eating.
Yep.
I have a home.
Yep.
I have transportation, and I was able, regardless of how I feel about Christmas, I was able to give kids things that make them happy, right? And so
Right.
it's like there's this constant grappling and this internal tension because it's like I don't know when enough is enough. We keep asking the government for reparations and they give us, uh Harriet Tubman on a bill. So like, it's really maddening to be politically adjacent, to be in leadership and in power and still see all the ways that systemic racism trickles, throughout infrastructures. The bigger the organization, the more systemic racism there is. And then also be having
America's a
conversations like
damn big corporation, so
it
you
is.
know.
And like then also to like see the people in it breaks my heart, like as someone who like loves people and loves like seeing people thrive and shine. Like it breaks my heart to watch some of these interactions and lives that people are living. I feel like there's something more, and I know that there's circumstances, opportunities. I never did this alone. Like, I haven't gotten where I've gotten alone. And it's constant auditing of like who's in my camp, who's in my circle. Do I still feel good around them? Am I gonna spend time with them today? How do I interact with folks that are going through their own struggles as well as cultural and ethnic struggles as well? Because look around, you know, we're all going through it. And like, who's to say that the last 75 years for Palestinians was like okay? Like, even though we didn't hear a lot about it, like
Right.
y'all aren't that good over there in Palestine. Like they haven't been treating you that well, if we
Right.
know anything about, right? And then it's like, oh well, slavery was so many years ago. And then, you obviously experienced the caste system and what that would look like in your home country. So it's a lot of things to consider. And I just hope, my hope is in doing this podcast as well as like creating this platform is that you get to feel heard and seen and witnessed about your story, and people like you can connect with you, not like you just in looks, but like you in value systems, in beliefs, in community connection, and what that looks like in relationship. Because I mean, I know you have a really solid core group that people that you work with. But I mean, belonging is something that I can never tell you like, oh, this place has great belonging. Like, no, it
Right.
has belonging for me.
Right.
You have to find that. And I'm not gonna understate how hard it is right now because of all the nuance and all the complexity of all of our lived experiences. Like there's like when you think about all the miracles and all the travel and all the, plane jumping that required us to get here to this moment to be together on this call. We know because we tried, we rescheduled,
We
we
really
did all those
try.
things, and to know that all of that happened. I think we live around the corner from each other, to be honest. I
Yep.
actually think that, right? So to think about all of that brought us to this moment, like I just hope you find more moments that connect you and want to hear your voice and your story. And you find some of that belonging and those answers to those questions dissipate. Because I think not that it's easy for me to say, but because of my lived experience, I'm like, listen, people will turn on you in a heartbeat. Find the people that you can trust and rock with them. And then let them know, like, hey, that hurt my feelings. Or hey, that don't do that. Don't say that. Here's why. Like but I can do that in people that I'm in a relationship with, and it's not transactional all
Correct.
the time, right? Like I can do that with somebody that I care about. Like I care about perpetual learning and development. I don't know why, but that's apparently my mission. So like I'm gonna grow and learn and develop the rest of my life. It sucks. Like there are times when I'm like, I wish I didn't have to be this way, but I also like don't want a life where I don't.
I think
So
it's a beautiful thing.
absolutely. That's a great question. I think there will be lots of conversations about this. And um I know there's like Black Twitter and Indian Twitter got together. It wasn't, I mean, it was around Queen Elizabeth stuff. But at the same time, like I think there could be,
They're
I'm
already
always like,
doing
let's
that,
build. I'm like, let's
right?
build. Like
Yeah,
what can we
yeah.
do to build? And I know that you have found some of those connections as well in Columbus, but I'm more concerned with building and more concerned with connecting. Um, if I have a stance, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, I appreciate you going there with me. Thank you.
for sure. Sounds like it's been living in you. I hope it moved it around a little bit at least.
I mean, every conversation helps, right? I mean, I
Mhm,
try to have the conversations because I don't want to take missteps when I'm speaking with somebody either.
mhm,
So the more I know, the better positioned I am to have those conversations because it is a new arena for me. I mean, like I said, I've been struggling to find myself in this world of like white male chefs.
mhm.
And now I'm in a completely different world, so I have to like learn all of these new
You're in the
lessons.
nonprofit arena, so it's white women executive
Right. So
director.
now it's white women that I have to deal with. And I'm like, oh shit, now what? I just figured out the dudes. Like, what do I do with y'all?
No,
Like,
for real.
you know,
We love y'all white women in
it,
the nonprofit sector.
you
We
know,
we do.
but I also get exhausted of being like,
Yeah.
right? Like, it
Mhm.
can't, like, you can't always walk into every situation and people are just waiting for a story. Like, oh, so what brought you, where did you come from? And it's like, can we just read the book?
That's how I feel about
We
right.
can just
That's how I feel about my pronouns too, because people will be like, and I'm like, just you she. Like
just
if it's gonna be a thing, you she.
right, like
Like let's
just
just move on.
let's move
Move
on. Let's
along.
just like have, let's
Let's
get to
have
the
the
meat and
conversation. Let's
potatoes,
get to work.
right?
Right.
Like, yeah, like you can just Google me or something. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm sure there's like pick up a story about Princess Jasmine. Like, just pretend it's me. I don't know. Like, can we just
Can we not? Can we not do
but
this?
but it is like a little like, just exhausting to just walk into the room and already be the one that's
Mhm.
different,
And people are
right?
like Sangeeta, and
Sanjay,
it's
Sanji,
Sanji,
Sangaretta, like,
and you're like, your last name is
yeah,
Majewski. Like, give me
yeah.
a
I'm like,
break
come
here.
on. Have you seen some of those football players' names? Like, what are you talking about? I bet you know every one of their names,
They do. They know every
right?
one of their names.
And I'm like, and some of those Polish names will trip you up, man. Like, how can you say a W and a Z together without hesitating?
Why do y'all do that all day? Like, whose
Right.
idea was this?
But mine is like completely phonetic. And I would rather somebody asked me 8 times than just not say my name, which I think is like even like ruder. Like, I'm just like, what is just
I'm laughing, but it's so true, and I'm laughing because I get it.
like I
Like,
wanna, yeah, I wanna be like,
I've been called Kathleen, and I'm like, my mom literally gave you the easiest job ever. Karen is the easiest name. It's not boding for well for me in the last few years, but
yeah.
people are like,
But
but I mean, people do say, "Oh, Karen," and I'm like, "Black Karen." But then like, people also be like, "I'm not that kind of white person. Like, I'm not a white Karen." And I'll be like, "Great."
super.
I'm
Congratulations.
excited to actually talk to you now.
Right.
But yeah, it's been interesting. But
But
yeah.
it is, and that is one of the things, like, the last 4 years, I have been using my name,
Mhm,
Sangeeta, more than I ever did before. Um, since I was young, like, in school, in India, my girlfriend started calling me Sang, and that
mhm.
just kind of stuck. And even that is difficult for people here, right? Because they're just like Sanji, Sanji, Sanj, and I'm like, no, just sing, like sang a song, past tense. Don't want you to sing right now. Like it's a done deal. Sang, like, but the last 4 years I've been like Sangeeta, and then I'll just stand there and I'm like, do you want to try to say it? Like I can break
Ooh,
it down for you,
that's sweet.
do this right now,
Hmm.
because then you'll remember it because I
Hmm.
just shamed you. But
I don't think that's shame. To
no,
me, that feels like an
it's not.
invitation.
But
That
it's
feels
just
like an
like,
invitation into like
and I
practicing.
go into it really warmly. I'm like, "It's Sangeeta, might be a little difficult, but, we can say it together, Sangeeta."
I believe in you.
And but
That's
I
sweet.
have, like, come back to that again,
Hmm.
coming back home, I've come back to just using my name. I'm like, "Take a moment, like, just" that's the first step to getting to know somebody, right? Like,
Hmm.
say their name.
Mm.
Just give me that much respect, say my name.
I think that's a really good way to end this. We're gonna
Yeah,
respect you, say your name, and I'm gonna give y'all all the links to find Sangeeta and what she is up to and what she's doing. If this conversation moved you and you want to reach out to Sangeeta, let me know. I'll filter that for you, but we'll send them your way. And I know you can find Sangeeta on LinkedIn, super active on LinkedIn, Lakhani, right?
mhm.
And you'll see her name also in the box. So you'll see the name in there. Look it up on LinkedIn and connect, especially if you're about what she's talking about. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your transparency and your kindness shine through. And I just appreciate being able to finally spend some time with you. It's been so good.
Thank you so much.